Awesome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm honored. I feel like I'm sitting here with royalty and I'm just like a delusional redhead. This is great. I feel insecure in the best way possible.
The king and the jester. I love this is the king's court. What's up? Cool. All right, B, why don't you start off with a good question, Mikey?
All right. So, oh, wow. Where are you right now? And how are you feeling right now in this moment, this present moment today?
Yeah, I'm in my home in Austin, Texas, and man, I feel graceful and passionate today. I've had such a beautiful day of creativity, filming, and all things that not only fulfill me, but they impact other people in one way or another. And man, if feeling on purpose was an actual feeling, and I think it is, that's how I'm blessed to feel right now.
How's Texas? Sorry, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish.
How is Texas dealing with it? Sorry, where we are, we're in LA County.
Yeah.
Like people are freaking out because, first phase until July.
Yeah.
I'm not in Texas. I've been to Texas, Houston a couple of times and that. Where in Texas are you and how is it with you guys out there?
Yeah, I know in LA County, you're basically in prison right now. So I'm in Austin, Texas. Beautiful. And things here are getting more and more beautiful. I'll share this with you. It's so heartwarming. This past weekend, my friends and I, we went out paddleboarding, stand-up paddleboards. There's a river, a lake here in the downtown area. There were literally thousands of people on the water, on their paddleboards, kayaks, people walking on the sides. Nobody's in a mask, yet everybody was wearing a smile. So for me, it's a beauty. I mean, I'm all about everybody take the precautions that you feel are right for you. Yet what's most heartwarming is I was seeing people just abundantly happy. And, we've had at least a couple months here where you haven't seen many people. So, man, it felt like old times. It felt like 2019.
Wow. Well, speaking of old times, JP is a comedian, right? You have a great show, great following. I love your stuff. And I've been thinking, because if I think, when you look back and say, what could you be good at? I'd love if I had enough courage to be a real comedian, right? Like stand up and be clever enough to be quick. And this is a cheat. Like doing this stuff that I do is a cheat on being a comedian because I can pick and choose my spot to like tell one good joke. Like I could say, hey, the funny thing about JP is when COVID started, he came on the show and he had as much hair as Rob Fazio. And now look, we got to get the barber in, right? Like you can get stupid shit. But what's interesting about comedy for me that's so frustrating, and it's even worse now, is like this political correctness, right? Nobody can take an effing joke, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I also like really good humor. And then on top of people being hypersensitive about jokes, they don't put any cultural historical context into things, so they're persecuting people from like 30 and 40 years ago that are telling jokes that were not only acceptable but appreciated at that time. They may not be appropriate today, right? Slavery is not appropriate today, but there was a time it was appropriate. People voted for it, right? It's not appropriate. I'm not advocating slavery, but if you were telling a slavery joke when slavery was legal and you're persecuting a guy to tell the joke, I'm just so blown away. Now add on to what we were going through where they're not going to let anyone that ever told a joke that was offensive to host the Oscars. So now the poll's about 0. And then pick every comedian and the ones that are really good, right, that have the night shows, the best of the best, the guys that have been on Saturday Night Live, and they've proven their mettle, right? Trevor Noah and Seth. These guys are real comedians. They walk the walk, right? I mean, you got to be a genius to be these guys. Then they go ahead and say, not only can't you offend anyone, don't you dare say anything about COVID because people are dying. And then we're going to put you in your closet with no, technology at all, with nobody laughing at you. And you're supposed to be funny. And it's like such torture for me because I am like an ant on their ass of funniness, and yet they're stuck in an impossible situation to try to be effing funny, where at least you can be funny on YouTube and get technology the way it's supposed to be. What's your feeling of that, like political correct, closed-minded comedian shit?
First off, you have my boiling, so I do have an opinion on everything you just said. Man, first off, when we dig up the past, like Eddie Murphy's special Delirious, which is iconic, or George Carlin, Richard Pryor, we're like, well, they said something that's not correct for today's values. That's the old wisdom. Don't use today's values to judge yesterday's choices. I'm not the most educated man in the world, but I could look back at my choices in third grade and just be like, fuck it. 10-year-old JP should be canceled. What an idiot. He would piss his pants once. He would never have another opportunity for the rest of his life. But that's what we're doing. Now, one could also make the argument, even if something is not politically correct present day, we're not talking about Eddie Murphy in the 1980s anymore through today's lens, but we're talking about someone in 2020 saying something that's not politically correct in 2020. One, including myself, would make the argument, say it if it's your truth. I was in a comedy club in Philadelphia a little over a year ago, Punchline Philly. And a lot of times when comedians come through, they'll sign the wall. And of course, the first signature that I see is Dave Chappelle. And Dave Chappelle wrote a note. And on the wall, all it said was, "Dear comedians, you have one job, and that's to keep telling the truth. Dave Chappelle." Now, I understand, a comedian who's tied to a network, a show, they have a master. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they work for someone and they have to be obedient to their values. Personally, as long as I don't get banned by YouTube, which is actually becoming controversial present day, as long as I don't get deplatformed on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, I could say what I want because the only person I work for is the people who choose to watch. And, you hear Joe Rogan talk about on his podcast, his freedom that he feels so grateful for, that he's not with a network. He's not on a radio station where he has to well, Joe, you went a little too far there. We got to pull you back. He can speak his mind. And, one of the greatest personal freedoms that I value most as a human, let alone as a comedian, is my ability to speak my mind. Because the number one principle in comedy is truth. If you ain't speaking the truth, you're not funny. You're getting pretty damn vanilla. And, there's a truth that everybody's aware of. And if you're not saying the things that everybody's thinking, but nobody's saying because it's a little bit edgy, unfortunately, you need the laugh track because what you're allowed to say, it's not going to be funny. You're not utilizing your God-given comedic talent. I've got an opinion. I think people should speak their truth. Here's my other opinion. I think whoever the creator is, God, L. Ron Hubbard, Santa Claus, whoever created us, had an intelligence so divine that they gave us a voice for a reason. If I didn't know any better, I'd think they gave us a voice because we're supposed to use our voice, specifically to use our voice to speak our truth. Not to masquerade our truth as the absolute truth and proselytizing, but to express ourselves, to speak our truth. I might be a delusional redhead to think that's why our voice projects outward, but maybe it's there just to silence so we can get constipated out of two orifices. Maybe, I don't know.
I love the fact because I see my eyes as my mouth as well. My big shift in the paradigm of life was not only my voice to project the truth and to manifest and materialize what I'm saying, but also my eyes project the truth, right? I'm giving meaning to what I see. And so if I'm projecting my voice in the saying, people are giving meaning to what I'm saying. So if through humor that what I say offends, it actually does good. Yeah. Right? People don't understand that we have to express the truth, because sometimes to shock people raises the awareness and say, hey, this isn't right. Like, he may be making fun of it, but it's because it's not right. And I see that historically. I'm a student of comedians. I literally love human nature. And I love the fact that somebody can say something so offensive. You think Eddie Murphy, half the shit he said was because he wanted to perpetuate the discrimination against Black people or women or whatever? No, he was raising awareness saying, this shit is wrong. I'm making fun of it because this shit is wrong, and let's all do something about it. And because I'm not there, hurting people in the streets and protesting, instead I'm using humor to edge our way towards a better world, a peaceful world, and let us all laugh at each other together and say, hold on a second. Everybody, no matter what color we are, like, I remember whatever a movie I saw, that it was one of the funniest things that they said. He's like talking about racism, and he's like, I got a cure for that. And like, what is it? Let's all just F each other. And like, what? Yeah, we'll all be the same color someday. Right? Now that shit is funny and it makes sense to me. Right? Let's just promote sex and let's all turn the same color. There'll be no racism. This is good stuff. Mikey, go ahead. Sorry.
It's funny because I did stand-up comedy for a couple of years, and I was at the Laugh Factory, and I was opening a friend of mine, Colin, his name's Colin Kane, and he's really, really offensive. And when we did the first, I was 8 nights, and the guy said to me, look, I dropped a certain word, starts with C, ends with T. And I'm like, I'm Australian. That's how we talk. He's like, you can't do that. So my friend who got me the gig, I was over, he goes, as soon as you come out, you've got to drop that word. Like, you just got to keep saying the word. I want to really annoy this guy. So I went through the whole set, and I must have dropped the word 50 times. And then after the set, he basically, I was fine, but he told my friend off who gave me the opening gig. He said, like, he kept dropping that word. He's like, dude, it's comedy. It's comedy. He's Australian. That's what we say. He says that. Australians, English, use it like it's nothing. So what I loved you say, I have 2 questions for you. London Real right now is going through a lot of problems, Brian Rose, because of the stuff he's saying. I want to know how you made the transition from doing comedy stuff, but then doing deep spiritual stuff. Yeah. And really incredible to do both. Like, to be able to do the spiritual stuff, but do the comedy stuff and still have relevance in both. How did you do that? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, the transition was actually backwards. So I started the spiritual stuff first. I've been on a conscious spiritual path, just to sound pretentious, since I was like 18. And I had been doing life coaching for 13 years before I even made my first comedy video. And that was really working with people to help them help themselves to heal their undealt with wounds, traumas, things that were holding them back in their hearts and their psyches. And I actually started YouTube. I was doing it for about 1.5 years, just doing sincere life advice videos, boring as all hell, but sincere life advice videos. And nothing big at all. But during that time, I was telling myself a story. It would be bad for business and it would discredit me to let my natural sense of humor out publicly or professionally. But I kept having these ideas to share my perspective through the language of comedy. I'm like, oh, this is still going to be a bad idea, bad for business, but I'm going to do it. So it turned out the story myself was dead wrong. Best thing I ever did for my business. Internally, it was a powerful rite of passage where I risked being myself to a greater degree. I up-leveled my authenticity. I thought it was going to, like, people would reject me, discredit me. Yet it turns out, I think for all of us, the best thing we can do is be as true to ourselves as we can be in the moment. So that's when I started integrating the comedy with a message. And it sounded like a pretentious artist for a second. All of my comedy, in my opinion, has some level of a message embedded, depending on the video or the bit on stage. Some will have more of a message, some a little bit less of a message. Yet for me, my mission isn't to make people laugh. My mission is to help people wake up, and humor is a language that is just natural for me to speak. And it's a language that people want to pay attention to. And I think it's a language when a message is communicated through the language of humor, the natural defense mechanisms of the ego don't come on red alert. Like if you You walk down the street corner, you see the guy with the Bible yelling into the microphone, proselytizing. It's human nature. The ego gets defensive, and that's not a bad thing. Yet when there's a message that might be even in our own good, we can even get defended with that. But when the message is spoken through humor, it's like got the vibration of playfulness, and it registers like, oh, there's nothing really to defend against. So it can go in, not to brainwash someone, but for them to actually be able to genuinely sit with and consider it and reject it if that's in their best interest, or accept parts of it if that's right for them. So yeah, I figured out that humor is not only me, but it's also a great catalyst to communicate deeply with people.
So
Well, you're the epitome of the truth vibrates the fastest, and humor being that vehicle is an extraordinary one. And I so much enjoy what you do. Appreciate you. Got to come back on here. More than happy to come on your show, strut my comedic self the best that I can. But you're incredible, JP, and thank you so much for your wisdom and the delivery of that wisdom. Thank you.
David, thank you. I'm happy to come back anytime. I want you on my show. I'm going to come live with you.
Right
No
on.
boundaries anymore. Mike, you're a rock star. Thank you for having me, guys.
Awesome, man. We'll see you soon. Thank you, JP Sears. Check him out, especially on YouTube. He's my kind of comedian. Truth vibrates the fastest. You'll see the frequency as we go. Thank you very much, JP.
so awesome.